What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again, breaking down episode 5, part 5 of We Own This City. Pretty much an episode showing us the final days of the task force before they get arrested, and we see how Nicole Steele played into that narrative. We're going to be discussing that and so much more in today's spoiler breakdown review. But before we get into the discussion, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel and love early movie reviews, TV breakdowns, and live streams, well, come and join the community today by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. If you all enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you're liking this review as well as sharing it, but more importantly, sharing your thoughts on this fifth part in the comments from your pros, your cons, and of course what you all hope to see in next week's finale. Let's discuss it all in the comments below. With that being out of the way, full spoilers ahead. As we open the episode mid-conversation with Gondo, aka G-Money, he's talking about his time with Wayne. Now, as the conversation pivots, he talks about his time robbing people in 2008, one time he got shot in 2006, but then as we're noticing in this conversation, the corruption just isn't on the streets, but it's also amongst the police department, as these so-called friends between Gondo and Jamel, they have many different stories to share here. As we transition over to Jamel, he goes into a flashback in which we see his early days in uniform and his time with his side piece who gave him critical information on things that were shaking out in the streets, and this is where Jamel gets questioned about his side of the story. We learn more about Jamel in these sequences. More in particularly, he was responsible for not one, not two, but multiple killings on duty, and he got off due to his deputy keeping him protected, and during his time he got a pass. He was only put on suspension with pay before being transferred over to the task force. Now, within learning more about Jamel, we see that when he came back from suspension, it kind of went downhill from him. But also, the biggest thing in this account is that they were seeing that both of these men, Jamel as well as Gondo, they're selling each other off. They're really not there for each other. They're really not friends. But more particularly, we see in this scene, as the FBI points out, the fact that these officers continue to get promoted after all their terrible acts, as they call it, cream rises to the top. Now, transitioning into a time where Jamel describes a robbery back in 2014 with his supervisor Thomas and his son and G-Money, we see that they cleaned house over $416,000. And I might have got this wrong, but when Jamel was talking about this story, he said when the county came in, they only saw 350. Now, I don't know if we're taking 416 minus the 350, which would give them like 66,000 roughly, or he was saying they only left and they only found $350, which if that's the case, I mean, number one, they're robbing people, so it doesn't matter the schematics or the logistics. They're robbing people, which is wrong. But if they only left $350 and they bank it and pocket it, the rest of that money, highway robbery. But I think he's saying that they only took 66,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like I said, the meat of this is they were just out here robbing people. And then Thomas had his son involved. This showing you not only were these cops giving bad advice and doing things that were just terrible within the department, they're showing you that even people that was involved in other people's families, like Thomas, for example, he's showing his son these terrible corrupted things, which just kind of shows you how deep this corruption actually went. Let me know your thoughts on all that. Following up with Ward in this episode, we get more stories of his time with Wayne, and he brings up this particular #1 fan that went by K-Stop. Now, we go into this whole situation about last week. Can we trust Ward? Where there's a particular scene, as you all can see on the screen now, in which we see Ward talking to Gondo and really praising Wayne, and more particularly how he might have some kind of unorthodox ways, but at the end of the day, you end up getting paid when you work with Wayne. Now, like I said in my review last week, can we trust Ward when it came to him dumping the money, not taking the money? Well, the way he was talking to Gondo, to me, kind of gives it off like he knew what was going on. He took some of that money and he didn't just throw away money like he said in last week's episode. I might be wrong, but let me know your thoughts on how he was essentially praising Wayne in this situation when he was talking to Gondo about, oh, you about to be really set up when you're working with Wayne. Let's talk about that in the comments. But getting back into the conversation, we see that the FBI has tapped their phones, and this is where they're talking about Wayne being off the chains, and this is where the FBI is like, yep, this is just one more tally, ultimately leading to tax fraud, and we get a lot more other things that they get convicted with. But again, just hearing Ward talking to Gondo in that moment just really kind of sold to me that he wasn't as Mr. Clean Cut and all that different stuff that he kind of portrayed last week. But let's get back into the breakdown here. As we check in with Wayne on July 15, 2016, Jamal recalls a particular story in which they turned over and they busted a drug dealer, in which Wayne pretended to be a U.S. attorney, in which we see another robbery take place. It is detailed that they were really in there to get it, and they were not only stealing that drug dealer's money, which ultimately they said they only found $50 when the actual county police came to his house and looked at his mansion. But that's where we're starting to see they were robbing each other, and we kind of knew that very early on when we saw Thomas taking the money and not telling Herschel about it. So again, this just kind of goes to show they claim to be brothers in arms, and I'm just talking about this group of people, these 7, plain sights police officers, but they were really just looking out for themselves at the end of the day. And just going back to that scene with Wayne, him pretending to be a U.S. attorney to get this person who they're busting to try to give him more information, man, like it was just so mind-boggling to see them just lying, impersonating a U.S. attorney to get information so you can rob them. Is just some really messed up stuff. But let's talk about Wayne a little bit more, because we spent a little bit of time with him in this episode, with his family, but also we see his affairs off-site and when he's not with his wife and his newborn kid. Again, I have in these 5 episodes, and this is where kind of my criticism kind of comes in this episode, and we'll talk about it a little bit more further in review. When we're focused on one character like we have been in episodes 3 and 4, which Wayne was kind of the central character in those 2 episodes, and then every now and then we would pivot to Sean and Nicole and see what's going on with Herschel and stuff like that. But this episode, we really didn't shine too much light on one central character. And in this case, I guess you can say Nicole had a little bit more to do in this episode, as well as the FBI angle. But again, just spending those couple scenes with Wayne to me really didn't do much for me as far as just like the narrative being focused. But again, let me know what you all thought of Wayne and his, escapades off, with his wife and cheating on his wife, and also his, online browser with his dog being there. That was a little weird if you ask me. But let's get back into going over to January 10th, 2017. We see that K-Stop, again, you got to remember that he was the mentor and loved Wayne and looked up to him. He wasn't a dirty cop. He wasn't corrupt. As we see Wayne and Herschel and K-Stop, they're talking on the side of the road, and we're seeing Wayne testing him, and he did not pass the test in a good way, right? Because we see that not all the cops were corrupt. Not all cops wanted to rob people and steal from people. And as we see in this scene, even though that he looked up to Wayne, he told him the truth that no, that's not right. If he gave him scenario, if we came across some money and do this, that, and the third, would you take it? And he says, no, we're police. We're supposed to police these streets, which was the right answer, but not the right answer for Wayne, as we find out that he had him transferred from the department so he wouldn't mess up his overtime game. So shout out to the good cops out there, and particularly in this scene, shout out to K-Stop saying the right things and, ultimately doing the right thing too. So getting back into it all, we transition over to May 2016, and this is where we kind of focus a little bit more on Suter in this episode, as he's on another crime case and an unknown victim. He comes across a man who grew up in the neighborhood who doesn't particularly like to talk to cops because of him calling them the jump boys, aka robbing people, jumping people, stealing from people. And based on his experience with the Baltimore Police Department, we understand why he doesn't want to talk to cops, because again, they've robbed him, they've done him wrong in the past. Just many examples, and more particularly an example from Sean's perspective in this episode. We see many times in this episode, especially towards the end of this particular breakdown we'll talk about, I think Sean might turn himself in because of all the stuff he experienced and kind of just swept under the rug and didn't tell anyone what's really going on with Wayne and going on in the plain clothes department. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But getting back into what's going on with this particular character, he's having a conversation about his experience with the task force, and he's seen some things that he's definitely not proud of. And we're going to talk about Sean when we get down to that point in the review. But let's transition over to Nicole Steele. He's investigating an individual by the name of James Otis. who was someone that was actually robbed by the police. Now, he goes into a situation in which he came across Herschel, and we see this despicable move by Herschel, and we've seen him do this before early in the season, where he pretends that the person hit him and he has them arrested. He goes around to searching James's car, and he ultimately steals $658 from James, which he worked hard for. And we get more details into this situation, in which James tells us that he was locked up not only for 2 days, he lost his job and only received $50 that was stolen from him. But also, when you add into all the different things that he went through, now get into the police aspect, as he's arrested and he gets screwed over even more times here, they give him the choice. Hey, we'll throw out your case as long as you sign this paper saying that you weren't falsely arrested, which just kind of, he's caught between a rock and a hard spot, right? Because if he gets arrested and doesn't sign this, they're going to find some type of way to screw him over. I mean, the man at this point has lost his job, lost the money he worked hard for. It's just so despicable to see what was done to these people on the streets. I just feel so bad for him and his family, and it's just like, this is just so effed up on so many different accounts. Let me know what you all thought of that scene with James. But getting back to what Nicole was doing in this episode, we see that she now has the investigation of the Baltimore City Police Department by her division based on the information she's gathered so far, and it's time to get the commissioner's response. And we see the commissioner, he's all game for this. He's just like, you know what? This is true. We need to change the streets. And this kind of leads us into one of the more bigger scenes in this episode, in which we see having her meet with Trent Williams, who I'm a big fan of as an actor. He makes his appearance and he kind of shares his honest opinions on what he did. He was someone that taught police how to be honest, how to be good, and is really up to the police to be those good, honest cops after that point and when they leave his class. But he also goes into more about the discussion on the war on drugs and details the alarming arrest rate, all to, as we know, is just a tally to get statistics. But I really enjoyed that scene with them kind of discussion how the war on drugs, what does that really mean, and how does that affect, people in America, and obviously, again, the crime rates and the tallyings of the statistics, just to put a number on something for they can get paid, and how that plays into the politics. I really enjoyed that narrative and that scene there. Let me know what you all thought of it. But this is a really big moment here, as it is time to meet the mayor on a decree. Now, the commissioner, he's full game on this new police reform, but this scene just kind of blew my mind as we see the mayor's team essentially just brings up all the negative things about how expensive this is going to be and how much management this is going to be. And in particularly, speaking of management, one of the gentlemen says this is more so just an internal issue. How many commissioners have we had in the past 10 years? What, 3? He says it's more of a management issue. Like, are you serious? And we just kind of see where their dollars are being allocated and how they want to spend the money. It just really blew my mind. And it just, again, from not just a police department perspective, but it's the politicians. And again, it's just a ripple. It's just a kind of a ripple effect of how it starts from the top and it works its way all the way down to ultimately the people that's getting screwed over is the people they're working for, which is the citizens, which is the community, and how it's just like the money, the dollars. And the mayor even talking about, I want to make sure my grandson's safe, but you don't want to make sure that if something happens to your grandson, he's a black man, as we know, because she was black, he gets pulled over. Oh, where's those money going to go when you wish you would have had invested in, cameras and more equipment and better training? That scene to me spoke just highly of, again, it is the police, but it's also the politicians. So let me know what you all thought about that scene as we transition over to The Time Has Come, which is March 1st, 2017. We cut back to the day in which Wayne was taken in, but we also see the 7 other police officers in their plainclothes unit who gets charged with racketeering to conspiracy and robbery. Transition over to Sean, who sees the news, and he kind of replays the scene that we saw when the old man died. He replays the conversation he had with Wayne in his car talking about taking the money. And I think, and I might be wrong, again, I didn't look up all this true stuff. I haven't read the book like I mentioned in my review 1, but I'm assuming that his conscience is catching up to him, and I don't know if he's gonna like turn himself in or talk about other things that he witnessed, but we'll talk about that here in a second. Let's kind of wrap it up and talk about what we go from here to closing out with Nicole as she's having a conversation about how she got involved in the civil rights division. And she talks about a particular story in which her younger brother, who was kind of on the same path as her, but kind of strayed away and kind of did his own thing. But there's a particular incident where he got pulled over by the police, and there was obviously discrimination going on and profiling going on. And it was kind of that moment. She didn't like explicitly say that was the moment, but I kind of got the gist that that was kind of the moment that kind of made her go from not being an attorney. And she talked about how she was fed up putting black people in jail. But I think it was that moment when it kind of hit home, right? And we all kind of know certain things where people kind of not ignore, but they don't really see what's going on until they see it in front of them, and it happens to either themselves or someone close to them. In this case, it was her brother, and I think that was the moment she wanted to kind of switch over to civil rights. But we see that she kind of mentions something in this scene where she says to her co-worker there, where I don't know if any of this really gonna matter, but hey, someone has to make a change, and they just have to try, and that's all we ask for, right? In today's society, with corruption, with politicians, with police force, someone just has to make that move. Someone has to call out the hypocrisy, the discrimination, the injustices. And it's people like Nicole and everyone that we're seeing trying to make this change that can make actual change happen. So a small scene, but I really kind of enjoyed that. And we wrap up the episode with seeing Sean in the middle of the night after learning his, people he worked with in the past are now being arrested. He looks out in the window. And like I said, I don't know what takes place after this in the real, story. And of course, we know this is based on true events. Is he going to turn himself in? Is he going to come to the FBI with some more information? I guess we'll find out in next week's finale. Overall, like I said, as far as a review goes, I thought that this was, I don't want to say a step back, but episodes 3 and 4 to me were so much more focused because we were following what's going on with Wayne, seeing all the corrupt stuff that he was involved with, and then we would every now and then pivot over to different scenarios and different characters. But this episode to me kind of fell more in line with episodes 1 and 2, where we were just kind of bouncing. It wasn't as jarring as those first 2 episodes, but it wasn't as cohesive as episodes 3 and 4. But overall, I enjoyed the episode for what it was, and we ultimately saw them getting arrested, which I would imagine next week we're going to see them in court and see them going to jail and just trying to see this police reform being, implemented in the Baltimore Police Department. So, hey, I'll be back next week, but let me know in the comments your pros, your cons, your thoughts on what shook down this episode, and of course, what you all hope to see in next week's finale. If you stuck around to this point in the review, I appreciate every single one of you all. Before you leave, make sure to like, share, comment, come subscribe, come join the community, hit that notification bell. Hope you all are staying safe. Hope you enjoyed this breakdown. As you can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out my previous reviews for this show. Check out my most recent review, and we'll catch you all on the next breakdown.